What I do tomorrow is not determined by what I did in the past. It's determined by the sum of everything that I now know and the sum of everything that I choose to know.
Content warnings for this episode include political discussions and interactions with police and the criminal justice system.
Genderful would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests live and have dwelt upon. Today we honor the
Go Salish.
Mohawk, Algonquin, and Anishinabewaki.
The Potawatomi, the Myaamia, and the Peoria.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender-diverse people about their special interests. Hi, I'm GenderMeowster, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Miranda, and my pronouns are she, her.
The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, two-spirit, and gender-diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender-diverse community.
We want our audience to know that we hold multiple diverse identities and bring these lenses to the show with our passion for telling our stories.
I identify as non-binary, transmasculine, polyamorous, ADHD, autistic, and disabled with chronic pain and mobility issues. I also am white and reside in the United States.
I identify as trans feminine, neurodivergent, queer, and a person of color residing in Canada. We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There's no social or medical prerequisite to be included in the community. Welcome, everyone, to Genderful Podcast, a show interviewing gender diverse people about their special interests. This week, our guest Phoebe Rose, she, her pronouns, is chatting with us about the U.S. presidential libraries and presidential history. Phoebe was actually invited to the show today by Miranda. Do you want to take a moment, Miranda, and tell us about when you were on Phoebe's show?
Yeah, so I was on Phoebe's show last fall, so we had a lovely chat. I actually met Phoebe through a friend of the show, Jessie Gender. So we were just kind of chatting along in one of her live streams, and Phoebe casually mentioned that she has a podcast, and it's like, oh, and then we kind of like got in touch with each other, and then I appeared on her show, and then I invited her on this show, and here we are.
Yeah, it's awesome. Welcome to the show, Phoebe. It's good to have you here.
Welcome to you. Welcome, chat. Welcome, people that the chat can't see. Welcome, hosts.
So we have a couple questions we'd like to ask all of our guests, and then we have some that are more specifically tailored to the questions the topic that you brought for us. I'm wondering if there might be some things you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day.
Yes, there are plenty. Been at this a while. People who look at me think I'm a lot younger than what I am. So when I tell chat and I tell this podcast that I've been at this 13 years this year, that's a 1 and a 3, and then people start to try to guess my age. They get very confused. I mean, I was in an alcohol retailer recently, shall I say. And, I get ID. And I show the person my identification. And the guy is genuinely shocked when he sees the identification and realizes I'm in my mid-30s. And I'm not, just peeking over the age of 21. So that's something that confuses a lot of people because people still think I'm in a lot more throes of youth than what was. The reality is that I'm actually in my mid-30s. And as my mother likes to say, well, you're middle-aged now. And I go, no, the average life expectancy is still further away than me, so therefore I'm not quite middle-aged yet. You can only be middle-aged until you're actually, over halfway to being the average age of.
Oh dear, I'm middle-aged.
You see, but which country are you taking it for? Which country are you taking it for? Because it's higher in certain countries than other countries. So you could be middle-aged in the USA. You could be middle-aged in Britain. You may not be middle-aged in France, you see. You see,
Mm.
you gotta.
I'm pretty sure I'm middle-aged no matter where I go.
You see, there's things like that, but you just got to make sure that you get your parameters right, because if you do it right, because you see, I'm far beyond middle-aged in, say, some countries. I'm far beyond middle-aged in,
Yeah.
Italy, because they spent too much time having a good time and things like that. So therefore, it comes down a bit. Whereas in Britain, we don't really do anything, so therefore, it goes up a bit. But anyway, in my youth, that I was a gender diverse individual, it was a way of understanding that I did not conform to the stereotypical notions of what were expected. It's the 1990s, it's the 2000s, it's the United Kingdom, it's not the world's most progressive place. I mean, you've got Tony Blair as Prime Minister, you've just come off John Major as Prime Minister. I mean, you've gone from the dull man to smiling man. Neither one of them were very inspirational, but that's beyond the question asked to me here. And was I somebody who identified individual traits in me that were gender non-conforming? I'm not sure. In my youth, I could point to something that said that outward expressions gave that opinion, because I'm of the opinion, stick two fingers up at it, blow some raspberries and go and do it. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm one of those people. I mean, when I was 17, I spent 3 months traveling in Africa because I wanted to. But that trip, when I was 17, no, not 17, when I was 19, getting my years mixed up here. When I was 19, I learned a lot about me. And I, as a very white person, presenting as a very male person, learned a lot about other people on that trip, because I spent a large portion of time in KwaZulu-Natal, sometime in Swaziland, sometime in Zimbabwe, sometime in the Cape, South Africa. And those are areas that are very much living with the legacy of what it means to have an identity. And I learned a lot from interactions with a group of native Afrikaners who were guides for us. And they were very surprised that I was prepared to sit down and talk to them, because their perspective is not a perspective I was expecting. You think of Afrikaners, you think of the legacy of apartheid in South Africa. And they were genuinely disowning of what had been done in their name, which was always very interesting to see, that you don't have to live to the stereotype that you're supposed to live to. And when you see those kinds of expressions and understand that you don't have to do or behave or interact in the way that you're societally supposed to, it can be very freeing. But those kinds of things, they do open your eyes and your mind to perspectives that you don't expect. And I'd always considered myself to be a bit outlandish, shall we say. Not very conforming, not very comfortable. And it was at that, I can always trace it back to that point when that was my point, when I had gone, that is where my brain was like, okay, this is something that I'm fine with. That's the kernel of when I said to myself in my own transition journey, my own transition story.
That's the name of Phoebe's podcast, by the way.
That's where I trace my seed back to, is the journeys round Southern Africa, and the understanding that I have of me stems from my understanding that I have of race that I got in that part of the world, because they're both an identity that we have created as society. Race and gender are both societally created in some way. And it's the point where I go to me, that's where I stopped, and that's where I went. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't realize it as, oh, yes, this is the moment. But looking back, that's where I trace it back to, that journey of me as some naive 19-year-old traveling Southern Africa, learning about the world. And I learned more about me than I ever understood about me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you mentioned that kind of opened your eyes to not having to kind of fulfill the role that society expects you to play. So it's interesting that it's not coming from a place of necessarily gender diversity, but it's still kind of opened that door for you.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine it's been quite a long journey to get from there to where you are now. How would you say your relationship to gender has evolved over time?
It's insignificant. It went through a period of where it was something that I did not understand. It caused mental health issues that I did not understand. It was causing mental health issues. It became my whole world. And today, me personally, I wouldn't go as far as to say it is meaningless, but it is so background that I can now get to the point where I can understand the ignorance of gender criticals, because it is so background to me today. As I have done it, I am comfortable, I am happy, I don't experience gender incongruity like I used to. I am comfortable in my own skin. I have found peace with my gender. And if you, as an individual, have only ever had the peace that I feel with my gender, it's going to be an alien concept to you that anyone's going to not have peace. So I can understand where they're coming from. It doesn't excuse where they're coming from. It doesn't justify anything they do.
Yes.
But as a basal level, and how it is such an alien concept to them, where I am now, I can see that if I today had only had the experiences I had today, and I only felt the way that I do today about my own gender calmness, I would find it very difficult to wrap my head around what was being there. I wouldn't say that I would be unable to do it in the same way that I don't understand certain kinds of discrimination against individuals who are of a different protected characteristic to me. That doesn't mean that I don't empathize with them. Doesn't mean that I don't want to help that person. It's just that I may not be the best vessel to understand it. And I will not intrude in that area. And that's the position that I've got to with my own sense of calmness in my gender. I don't question, is this who I am? Because it is, as far as I'm concerned, who I am. I'm at a point with my own transition where I am comfortable to the point of it being in the same way that background radiation is something I'm comfortable with. So we all have background radiation, we all know it's there. My transition has got to the point where it's now become background radiation to me. That's considerably different to where I was, say, a decade ago, where it was my life. I was finding out who I was. I was desperately in this world trying to find out who I was in this world and who my true self is. I use true self in inverted commas there. Because as you get older, you learn more about yourself just in general. And the further I've been through my own transition, the more I've come to accept who I used to be, the more I've come to accept some of the more negative things about my life, and the more I've come to understand that the flavors of transition are all individual. And the flavors of transition are all going to be unique to you. And that's partly borne out in my show, because I'm now desperate to learn more, so that I can learn more about me and I can learn more about others. Because every episode of my show that I do, I learn more not only about the flavor of trans person that's in front of me, but I learn a little bit more about me. I gain a little bit more of understanding. And I think that if you were to look at the much discredited hierarchy of needs, I'm at the self-actualization point. I've got my basics, I've built up from there, and I'm now at the point where I'm now self-actualizing, and I'm now understanding, and I'm going out and finding that additional self-actualization. And that's where I've got to. It was a fairly large pyramid to climb, if anybody knows how horrifically bureaucratic the British system is.
Yes.
And if anybody knows how horrifically backwards the British system is, it is still a system that is of the gatekeeper model. And I fought that system. I'm quite a fiery individual when I want to be. I genuinely am a fiery individual. And I took them to mediation sessions, I had them over the coals and everything. And I got progress with it because I turned around in one meeting with somebody who said, "Oh, you're here for your review, are you?" I went, "I wouldn't waste my time traveling up from where I was living in Brighton to London to have you tell me exactly what I already know."
Yeah.
So we're here to make progress today. We're not here to review anything. So why are you actually here? Well, I would like a surgical referral from you today. And she went, "That's not what my paperwork says." So what I did was I leaned forwards, took a piece of paper, tore it up in front of her and said, "Shall we start again?" And she went, "Okay, we'll do both." But that was the kind of attitude that I found very quickly you had to take with the British NHS gender identity pathway, particularly in the 2010s. It was just dreadful. It was just dreadful. And going through what was done in relation to how slow walk they try to make things, it's just an absurdity. I'm not a fan of group therapy. Personally, it doesn't do anything for me. I know it does things for other people. I am not here in any way, shape, or form to be negative towards group therapy. But I was offered group therapy by this person that I have just talked to you about. And I said, "I thank you for the offer of more wasting of my time to slow down the process, but I don't need to sit in a room of other people to tell me what I already know to be true about myself and hear other people tell me what they already know to be true about themselves just to tick your box." They weren't impressed with that. And she went, "Have we done as a no for that then?" Well, you could sign me up, you could give me a referral, but I won't turn up to the meetings and you'll just be wasting your time. And I'll write a letter saying I don't want it. Not interested in group therapy. I'm here to see you, a psychiatrist, because somebody has decided on an NHS pathway that I have to see you, a psychiatrist, to tell me what I already know to be true and ask me some really offensive and, quite frankly, questions you wouldn't ask your worst enemy.
Yeah.
So we've now got that appendectomy out the way. I've seen one of you. I've seen another one of you. Now then, can we move on to the next stage so that I never have to see you again in my life? And she went, "That's not a very nice thing to say." I said, "You're a doctor. The only doctor I ever want to continuously interact with is a GP. And that's to get like vaccinations and the occasional thing when I'm feeling unwell. You are a specialist in a city miles away from me that I have no interest in interacting with because you're just here to slow down something that I already know in other parts of the world I would have had done years ago. So it's not you personally. I view them like the job centre. You don't ever want to go to the job centre. Job centre, it's where you go in the UK to sign on to claim your unemployment benefits. And I said to this person in the job centre, I hope when I get a job, I never see you ever again. Because it means I'm employed and it means I'm not down here signing on. That's how I viewed the gender identity clinic. If I don't ever have to see you again, I'm finished with you all. And that's it. Goodbye. It's quite a black and white way of looking at it. But it's the only way how I was able to look at it and not go to a place that disheartened me and caused me mental anguish. It was the only way how I was able to compartmentalize it as driving down a motorway that is just there, rather than it being, oh, this is a bit of a slog, this journey, this car, it's taking forever, etc., etc., etc. No, I have to drive this road. Let's get it done. There's a better thing at the end, and I never have to drive that road again.
Yeah, and I happen to be quite familiar with the situation over at the NHS. I mean, I'm a Philosophy Tube subscriber. I watch the videos, so I know all about this. But for the benefit of our audience that may or may not be familiar with the healthcare system in the UK with the NHS, maybe let's dive deep into this whole situation. So with trans healthcare in the UK, how many years did it take you from first starting to get just from first starting your journey to get some medical support?
Because I'm bolshy and because I'm self-absorbed, narcissistic, loud, and fairly aggressive towards individuals who are standing in my way, I pushed my way through the system. And I mean, I literally was pitchforking my way through the system. Get out of my way, get out of my way. It still took me 4 years.
Yeah, that's just...
That's still half as long as most people.
Say again?
That's still half as long as most trans people
absolutely.
I've heard over there. And
But
was that to get on HRT or to have
ago.
surgeries?
I was doing that a decade ago. So that was before the wait lists increased. If I was doing it today, it would probably have taken me 6 or 7 years to get to the point where I wanted, where I was comfortable to stop.
Yeah.
They wanted me to, I said, well, if I hadn't been using the grey market to self-medicate before I'd come to see you, when would you have given me hormones? Well, we would have given it to you after your 3rd appointment. I mean, thank goodness I didn't follow yours, because what a waste of my time that would have been.
Yeah. And it's
and they give you, so they make you so they made me wait 15 months for my first appointment from when my GP referred me. Then it was 6 months between appointments. So it would have been 15, 21, 27 months. But what they've done in the UK is they have intentionally, and I use these terms as somebody who's legally trained in a serious manner. I don't use them lightly. They have intentionally gone about finding a model that is breaking and are breaking the model so that it doesn't work deliberately. It's not a hyperbole to say that the British system of NHS pathway to get gender affirming care in the UK is not only broken, it is being smashed up by the people who are there to fix it. And if you present in a way that is outside of the normality that they are expecting, go away as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
So when I was going through the system, I went to a support group before I had my first appointment, and they gave me a cheat sheet. Turn up and do all of these things. Okay, so you are transitioning, as far as they're concerned, from male to female. Yes. Okay, here is your cheat sheet. Wear a dress or skirt, wear makeup, have a handbag, do your hair, etc. And for the men, it was wear a suit, have some kind of wallet with you that you take out in the meeting, etc., etc., etc. That was how absurd the British system was. And
you have to be as performative as possible.
Oh, yeah. And
yeah.
I will always remember this one guy, Dr. Barrett was his name, and I've heard stories about him. I'm quite glad I never got to see him because he may have got the wrong end of my fieriness. But he turned around and said, I don't understand all these people that say that trans people aren't They don't really come and see me in anything other than Well, I wonder why, mate. And it's just, you create a situation that you have fermented over time that does nothing but perpetuate your own 1980s views of things. And you're perpetuating them today. And in the end, I was told that my wait for my lower surgery after that appointment was going to be X number of years. And I was in a fortunate enough position that I was able to stick two fingers up at the NHS and go, give my place to somewhere else. I'm going to sod off to Thailand, which I did. That was a 1 year waiting list, and it cost me at the time £10,000. That was all in. That was flights, hotel, the lot. I then looked up how much the equivalent would have been charged to me as a private patient in the UK. Just for the surgical operation alone, as in the UK, it would have been £16,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with insurance.
No. In Britain, if you go private, sod insurance, you don't get that.
Yeah.
But
so it's either wait a really long time or pay £16,000 for private.
In the UK, that's if you want to go into the UK, or if you're able to and willing to save some money and go overseas.
Yeah,
fly halfway around the world, see a surgeon in Thailand and pay less money.
I mean, I'm currently facing that very same decision where I have to either wait several years to do it in Canada, or I have to go somewhere else and pay a lot of money. And it's basically all this money I've been saving to buy my own place. It's like, well, I can either I can give that up.
I had that choice. Like, I can deposit down on a place to live, or I can get gender affirming surgery.
Yeah. So it's just like, how badly do I want it, girl? It's boy. Now, Phoebe, you no longer live in the United Kingdom.
No, I don't. I left Turth Island.
Yes. Did you move to the United States for trans healthcare reasons or for some other reasons?
My now wife. It's as simple as that.
That's a very good reason.
For my now wife.
That's a very good reason. I mean, that's basically the only reason you can get me to go to Turf Island.
I think even then, I'd advise going to a neutral third country.
Yeah. No, that's
Republic of Ireland, fair. Norway, Iceland. They're close enough.
Yeah. But yeah, genuinely, I love that for you. I did want to segue to our special topic of the day, which is U.S. presidential libraries and presidential history. Wow. For those of you who are just listening, Phoebe just showed us her American passports.
That's not an American passport. This is a passport style book they give you.
Oh, my bad.
So that you can go through.
So the green screen is messing with it. So
it is.
Okay. I just saw passport and I assumed it was a passport.
So it is a blue A7 booklet where you can record all of your visits to presidential libraries across the United States. The most recent presidential library in here is the Presidential Library of the 43rd President of the United States. And the first one is the President Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
I don't like the 43rd President of the United States.
Well,
I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to make a list of presidents I do like, it would be a very short list.
Number 42, though. Number 42. I
Which
did
one was
like number
42? I don't know the numbers. I just know the names.
Oh, Bill Clinton was nice.
Oh, I do not like Bill Clinton at all.
I understand why
At
people don't
all.
like Bill Clinton, but my mother and I quite like Bill Clinton.
Yes. I mean, I understand the appeal, but I'm not a fan. But I mean,
the thing was, though, the thing that you have to understand with Bill Clinton was that he was coming into an America that had had 12 years of incredibly conservative presidential management.
yeah, I mean,
it had Ronald Reagan for 8 years and then 4 years of Bush 41.
Yeah.
So anything that was a contrast,
sure,
was going to be better than 4 more years of George Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah, I don't think that gives him a pass for all the not so great things that he did. So, but yes, it relatively.
I could make a crass joke,
yes.
but it would probably violate the PG-13 content here.
Yes. No, this is a really interesting topic because we generally don't talk about this sort of thing on the podcast. So what initially sparked your interest in presidential libraries and presidential history?
I have a thing when I go to places that I go to destinations. So I need things to do when I go to a place.
Mm-hmm.
There's a museum, I go to that museum. There's a large, hulking museum ship, I'm going to go and look around it. I'm going to go and look around this national park. I'm going to go and do things like that. And I was in, of all places, Los Angeles. April 2017, I was there. And I was staying with my then partner. And I was looking for things to do. I had just finished law school. And I was I was halfway through law school. I was taking a break sometime in the term. And my then partner, who lived in Los Angeles, said, "Come out and see me." And I went, "Yeah, okay, I'll come out and see you." And I was looking for things to do that were a bit esoteric, that were a bit, different. And I went, "Let's go to Yorba Linda, California." For anybody who is astute, you will know who I'm going to be talking about in a minute, which is why there's a content warning at the top of this. Because the president who has his library in Yorba Linda, California, is the only president in American history ever to resign. So that's a very controversial individual. And I knew virtually nothing about Richard Milhous Nixon. I knew virtually nothing about it. Because all you know from modern history is Watergate scandal.
Mm-hmm.
But he also set up the EPA. The Environmental Protection Agency was signed into law along with the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act by Richard Nixon, of all people. And I didn't know those things.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Nixon was a corrupt as they come individual. That was all I knew. I didn't know anything about him as the person. I didn't know anything about how he had been before he got to the White House, how he grew up in the Great Depression, how he applied for a job with the FBI and got told, "No, we don't actually have any jobs at the moment because we haven't got enough money to hire you, but we would if we could." And the site that they have is also where his birthplace is. He was born in a small house on this grounds. And you look at the politics of it, and you look round these things, and you see the very large exhibit that's dedicated to the Watergate scandal there. But you also see everything else that came with it. You see the 68 election, you see the 72 election. And for one, yes or no, Richard Nixon before Watergate, was actually a very popular person with the American public, which surprised me because you think at the end, oh, he resigned in scandal. Yes, he may have resigned in scandal. They still had to elect him. He still won the votes. It wasn't like George Bush in the year 2000, where he lost the election but still became president. And I learned a lot. Yes, there is some puffery that goes with it, but you're going to get that with anything dedicated to any person's time in any specific office.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of have a critical eye when you look at these sorts of things. So yeah, absolutely.
But I also didn't know what Nixon did after his presidency. He tried desperately hard to rehabilitate his image.
Mm-hmm.
He was a desperately unhappy man with how he had left office. And I think to a degree, he managed in what he did afterward, because he opened up China and he kept on trying to open up China to the world. And I think that certain things that he did during his presidency are overlooked. And it doesn't give him a free pass to have sent in the plumbers to the Watergate hotel complex to raid the Democratic National Committee because he didn't want his opponents to have anything. But it did show that he was somebody who had an idea of what the job entailed. He knew what the job meant. And it humanized what was this demon character that you see. Oh, it's Richard Nixon, the demon who resigned in scandal, who recorded everything, etc., etc. And it gave me the perspective that you can't forget the other things that happened just because something louder, fresher, and sexier turned up in its way. Nixon in China is largely forgotten nowadays because of Watergate. And people think of Ronald Reagan and Reykjavik and so on. But things that I realized walking around that museum was that there's actually more to this than what you need to hear about Watergate. And the fact that it now has all of the presidential papers, all of his papers from his political life there, you can study Richard Nixon up the back teeth. And I think that's a very important historic resource for a country that has very difficult decisions to make in November of this year. It has very difficult decisions to make. Where does it want its country to go? And when you look back at the Watergate scandal, the system worked. That was the thing that got me the most. The American separation of powers system worked in the 1970s. Congress did its job properly. It was going to impeach the man. It took him seriously. It wasn't this partisan, fall in line cult fest.
Imagine a functioning Congress.
There are fewer things with opinion poll ratings lower than Congress. And one of them is the Supreme Court of the United States.
Oh boy, that's a whole other podcast. That
is.
Yes.
But after that, I then went to a number of other ones. And I would quite charitably describe the Ronald Reagan version as the Ronald Reagan cinematic experience and theme park. Because
oh boy,
that's
how
Ronald
appropriate.
Reagan. So there's like this whole Western section of the movie he did.
Of course.
Like But the thing with the Ronald Reagan one is there was random other stuff there as well. Like they had this artificial intelligence exhibition. Like, okay. And they had this, I don't know who in the chat will know who Madeleine Albright was, the Secretary of State under Bill Clinton. They had this whole exhibition dedicated to the lapel pins that she used to wear at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library.
All right.
But there were two things that stood out from those two libraries that I will always remember and enjoy having gone around to see. One of them was the Ronald Reagan Air Force One. That was an amazing piece of engineering. And the other one was Marine one at the Nixon Library. The famous one where he turns around, does his victory salute, and then flies off for the very last time. They have that in Yorba Linda. So you can go around and you can go, well, he stood here, etc., etc. And you can feel the history in these places. And it's important to remember the history that a modern country has. Because in the world that we have today of 15 seconds, sound bites of information and disinformation and misinformation, I find it quite relaxing to just go around some of these places at my own leisurely pace and just go, okay, let's learn about what actually happened. Not the nightly news spin, not the campaign spin. What actually happened here? What were the events? And I mean, I've been to the John F. Kennedy Library, and you go through the John F. Kennedy Library, and I forgot how early into his presidency he was assassinated.
Oh, yeah.
Because you see all these things that he was doing, and then it just goes and stops.
Yeah, it pretty much like he gets elected, Cuban Missile Crisis, and then boom, it's over. I mean, no pun intended, but
yeah, but you go through the museum, and the museum just goes in the same way, and that's very powerful when you go through it. Then the museum's just ended. And that's quite a deliberate choice they've done there. Because they do and you go through this bit and then it carries on a bit further, but they have this bit where you can just end when he gets assassinated. And yeah, some of these places are in wonderful parts of the world, and some of these places are in not so wonderful parts of the world. Some of them are in very accessible, tiny little towns in California. Trying to get to Yorba Linda is a bit of a nightmare. Trying to get to Independence, Missouri is a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
But there are some in some strange parts of this world. I mean, I shan't be going to Little Rock, Arkansas anytime soon. I shan't be going to Atlanta, Georgia anytime soon. I probably won't be going to West Branch, Iowa anytime soon. I'll probably wait for the election to clear off before I go to try to see those.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, it's like as trans people, there are certain parts of the country that are less safe for us than others. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but I view a presidential library not as just something that is the modern day pyramids, mausoleums of democracy. And they are actually learning experiences. Sophologists, political science students, they do have a serious historical value. And some of the documents there are amazing. The document at the Nixon Library that will always stand out to me was they have on display the speech he wrote if we couldn't get Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong back. And you read that through and you go, wow, he was actually, this point in history, there were two options. Either it's a success or they're dead.
Yep.
And they play the speech, and you've got the speech playing, etc. And you can pick up the telephone that he had in the Oval Office that called the moon and stuff. But they actually have the speech.
Imagine having a phone that calls the moon.
I know. Satellites, eh? And that was the 1960s. That was 1969.
Yeah.
But you can't ever underestimate the power of history,
Mm-hmm.
because it is true. If you ignore history, you're bound to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Like reading things like classical literature. I believe that classical literature has a place, but not the way that it's taught in schools, because
Mhm.
that just turns more people off than it turns people on, because it's all taught wrong as far as I'm concerned. But that's
Yeah.
a discussion for another day.
That's a third podcast.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot. Because like I'm a big museum nerd. Whenever I travel, I try to go to museums, but like presidential libraries, I would not even have considered going to them. But now I'm just like, oh, maybe I should check that out. United States presidential libraries, that is to say.
How many countries have presidents?
Just a few countries that have presidents. I mean, my country doesn't, but
I mean, you've ended up with, a very old man
yes.
who now has cancer. I mean, you wait your whole life for the job. Your mum dies, you get the job, and then, oh, bad things happen.
Yeah. Oh boy, we have an election coming up, and so do you, and oh boy.
Oh, yes. Well,
That's a fourth podcast
Justin's
we're gonna
been
start.
around a bit. I mean, Justin has been around a bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
But yeah, I wanna stay on topic, is because oh boy, do I have opinions on that I cannot share as a public servant myself. So I'm gonna.
are you in Purda yet? Are you
Am
in
I
Purda? I used to work for British local government, and we used to enter a section known as Purda, which was political. No, you can't say this, that, and the other.
Oh yeah. Well, so like I work in a very apolitical part of the government. I mean, we don't do policies, so it's just like, but it's also like we all had a meeting about how to use social media and what you can and can't say. So I'm just going to err on the side of caution and just not comment on political stuff on my public platforms. I'm just going to err. Oh, we get a little bit of we just got a little bit of crosstalk. Okay, that's okay. We're all sorted. But back to the topic of the day. So for those who don't know or aren't familiar with the concept, what exactly is a presidential library, and how many of them exist today?
Well, it depends what you mean by exist. But there are 12 physical libraries,
Okay.
which 11 of them have a museum attached to it. And Gerald Ford, because he wants to be different, decided to have his library separate to his museum. So
Okay.
Gerald Ford has 2 sites just because it's Gerald Ford.
Sure. I mean, it wasn't even elected, so whatever. Do what you want, man.
He wasn't. He was the only man never elected by the populace of the United States to the executive branch, but to have held both positions in the executive branch of the United States. But there are 12 presidents with presidential libraries, which have a physical location. Barack Obama hasn't finished building his yet, and the 45th president of the United States has an online-only virtual thing that's run by the National Archives Records Administration, because the 45th president thinks he's going to be the 47th president, so he hasn't bothered to build his yet, because you now have to fund them through private donations, and then you have to have an endowment and set them up. But since Herbert Hoover in the 1920s, he was the first person to have a presidential library. He wasn't the first president to build one, but he's the oldest going back to have one. And then you have the man who set it all up effectively, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. 4 terms, died in office. He was obsessed with the concept of public papers being public property, because previously presidential papers were considered the private property of the president, and they'd just walk off with them at the end. Oh, government business just being carted out by the guy leaving office.
Yeah, imagine just taking a bunch of confidential documents with you to your private residence.
Yeah, and then imagine storing them in a toilet.
Yeah.
or an ornately designed gold stage. But there are a number of things about these that have changed over the years. So originally, presidential papers, you just walk off with them. They were yours. They were private papers of the president. Slightly absurd thing to actually think about. Because you can write confidential memoranda about national security issues and walk off with them.
Hmm.
So until somebody got it into their head and had the bright idea that, oh, maybe we shouldn't let, private citizens get their hands on these individual things. Maybe it's a good thing that we keep hold of these things. They had to store them somewhere. They had to store them somewhere. At the George W. Bush Museum, there are 35 million presidential papers that were created during the 8 years of his presidency. 35 million of them. And that's everything from executive memos to executive orders to legislation. I've never known a country to generate so much paper. And the libraries store all of these papers. So in the middle of the California desert, in the Mojave Desert, underneath the Air Force One hangar that sits at the Ronald Reagan Library, are something like 28 million Ronald Reagan presidential papers. And it's just weird when you think about it.
Yeah, it kind of is.
That there is such a clean break between administrations as well. Because coming from a parliamentary system and you coming from a parliamentary system, they kind of bleed into each other. I mean, especially in Britain when we had 3 prime ministers in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a bit of a revolving door situation there for a little while.
3 prime ministers and 2 monarchs in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that makes it much harder to learn about what's been happening. Because it's all still in the machinery of government. Whereas the machinery of government is very stop, move on to the next. And I think that is, from a learning point of view, very useful. But it does create the situations where you do have some presidents do things that are not the greatest thing that you could choose to do.
Oh boy, that's one way of putting it.
So on the final day in office, Bill Clinton pardoned hundreds of people. You can't do anything about it. It's an executive power. And because he left office, there was no oversight. One of the people that he pardoned was his cocaine trafficking brother. Here, have a pardon. Oh, okay.
Sure.
Final day in office. So he got up early on the 20th of January, signed them all, and that was it. They were done.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a system that's open to abuse or anything.
No. I mean, the presidential pardon system goes hand in hand with the whole machinery of the presidency. Because America needs to understand what its own presidency is. And I think that presidential libraries give an insight into how it actually works, how it actually is supposed to function, and how it's supposed to go through the system of scrutiny that it's supposed to go through. How you don't elect kings in America.
I mean,
George
that's
the
the whole
Third
point of America, right? Was they didn't want to have a king anymore.
Yeah, and America is getting dangerously close to the position where it could be electing a king, and not a modern king either. We're talking a king from, Henry VIII, eat your heart out kind of king. But it is interesting that there seems to be a disdain for understanding in modern America. You don't want to see the other side when it comes to politics. You just want to beat the other side. And I think that presidential libraries humanize the office to a degree, because they tell you more than just the 4 or 8 years they were in office, or in the case of Gerald Ford, the something odd months that he was in office. But you have to learn from the history. At the Gerald Ford Museum, they have on display the guns that were used to try to assassinate him.
Oh, wow.
So there were 2 assassination attempts shortly after he came into office. And if he had been assassinated, conspiracy theorists the world over would have had a field day, because America would have had President Rockefeller.
Oh, geez. Oh, boy. I'm imagining the conspiracy theories already. I mean, as a conspiracy theory enjoyer, and to be clear, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I'm just fascinated by the theories themselves and the people who believe them. I'm just thinking about all the conspiracies that people could come up with a President Rockefeller timeline.
President Nelson A. Rockefeller.
Wow.
So he was the vice president to Gerald Ford, and if a member of the Manson family had succeeded in assassinating Gerald Ford, we would have had President Nelson Rockefeller.
Oh, I didn't even realize it was one of the Mansons that did that. Wow.
So yeah, if a member of the Manson family had tried to assassinate Gerald Ford, that was the second time. It would have been President Nelson Rockefeller.
Yeah. That's actually an excellent segue into our next question here. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question already, but for the benefit of the audience, do you think that learning from the past helps shape the future?
It doesn't necessarily shape the future. It stops the future from becoming a facsimile of the past. So you have to learn from not only the past, but you have to learn from the present as well. And there is some element of shaping, but the future is only shaped by the knowledge that you get from what you have chosen to understand. So you will choose to understand certain things, such as elements that have occurred in your own life. I am a much richer person today, and I choose to live my life as a much richer person today based on the experiences that I had growing up, transitioning, experiencing homelessness, experiencing unemployment, going to university, working for many, many people, going to law school, going to catering college, etc., etc. I am richer for those things. But what I do tomorrow is not determined by what I did in the past. It's determined by the sum of everything that I now know, and the sum of everything that I choose to know. Because there's only a finite amount of knowledge that you can take on. But there are certain things that are more important to understand. And I think that the most important thing to understand regarding history is how to critically evaluate history. A friend of mine and I, we go through deep historical talks sometimes, and we challenge the narrative that is presented today. We had a very interesting conversation on, were the war crimes trials of World War II legal? Or were they just victor's justice made up to make you feel better? The war criminals on the victorious side in World War II get away with it because they were the winners.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to not necessarily take the individual pieces of information away from the history, but you have to know what to do with it. And I think that the biggest thing that we lose today is in the 15-second, 30-second, 60-second soundbite culture of information that we take on. Platforms out there that give us shorts, TikToks, reels, and all this stuff that give us information in about this much with about this much context. And that worries me because I feel like I'm an anomaly. I feel like I'm an outlier.
Yeah.
I feel old-fashioned going to a museum, going to a place to experience things, because it's not something that I see as being promoted like it used to be. You can get your entertainment from what used to be the box in the corner. Now it's a screen and it sits in your pocket. You don't even need to leave your own bed. And that's concerning because it leads to the rise of individual politicians who manipulate that. And that's what's dangerous. But it also leads to the point where we now know a lot more. That telephone that I just held up is the only reason we know about George Floyd.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, I mean,
and the video camera is the only reason we know anything about Rodney King.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
And Katie Tur and her helicopter is the only reason we know anything about the LA riots. Because Katie Tur said to the helicopter person, "We're going down there." And the helicopter pilot went, "No, we're not." And Katie Tur went, "You can get out and I'll fly the thing." But that is another thing that worries me with the world, particularly the developments in New Zealand, where the main broadcaster in New Zealand, the main free-to-air broadcaster in New Zealand, is closing all of its news output. It's just closing it all. News Hub is being closed because it's not making enough money. And TV New Zealand is looking at getting rid of 65 members of staff because it can't justify the outlay. And that's bad for democracy. And that's bad for understanding because it means that more people get away with things. And citizen journalism, as nice as it sounds, doesn't have the same reach as other things because citizen journalism, quote unquote, only reaches the people who choose to interact with you, which can be said to be the same for any kind of media. But those people who choose to interact with you are usually infinitesimally small in comparison to the reach of a national broadcaster that's established. So ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, they're going to reach more people than me going outside with a camera and seeing police brutality. If they didn't pick up George Floyd, nothing happens. If they didn't cover the Charlottesville riots, nothing happens. Because it's seen only that people don't care. Decisions are made by those who choose to show up. Be a person who chooses to show up. Otherwise, a leader with no followers is just a man taking a walk.
And it's, oh boy, I mean, I could start a 5th podcast about my thoughts on the state of journalism today. And it's, especially with current events going on right now, and it's really exposing the failure of modern mainstream media. And like, I've reached the point where I just like don't listen to mainstream media at all. I get all my news from independent journalists. So it's
And I think that
Yeah.
is a sad state of affairs of
it is.
modern journalism. It's
It is.
it's journalism that costs money. It's worth paying for, but journalism that's not worth paying for is given away for free. Why do I have on my British media that I consume the first thing being a picture by a mother given on a social media platform? Why is that wall-to-wall coverage? The British government had a budget last week that's going to affect millions of people, and nobody cares. But oh no, someone used Photoshop on a picture and put it on social media.
Yeah. Because that's what gets the clicks.
And that's a sad state of affairs.
It is.
Because they've forgotten the number one thing that they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be bringing you the news, not giving you what you're told the news is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's
and just-
what's so.
It actually gets me really angry because like it's such like journalism and the news is such an important part of a well-functioning democracy, and the vast majority of journalists are really bad at it, like really, really bad at it. So it's just
And the other thing that
makes me
the
so
other
upset.
The other thing that gets me is that journalism is not a course you can teach. Journalism is a set of principles and standards that you live by.
Mhm.
Is this story true? Is this story full of integrity? Is this story something which is in the public interest? You can pass those three things well on your way. Not, is it salacious? Is it titillating? Is it interesting to the public?
Mhm.
If you're the Daily Mail and you're going after those three things which you have done for the last 30 to 50
Yeah.
million years,
I mean, we don't
that's
take the
not
Daily Mail
journalism.
seriously.
That's not journalism.
No.
Some
Oh,
my wife asked me, why do I buy the National Enquirer?
why do you buy the National Enquirer?
There's more real news in there than any tabloid mainstream newspaper.
Oh my God, that's a sad state of affairs.
Because they will cover things that aren't covered in other places. Yes, there's trash in the National Enquirer. Yes, it's run by a man named David Pecker. There's more news in the National Enquirer than there is in the Daily Mail. It may be celebrity news, but when you actually read below it, there was they had a double-page spread on Paula Peretti. If you know who Paula Peretti is, they had a double-page spread. And it was a really interesting read. It's all true, and it was all well sourced, and it was interesting. Yes, the headlines were nonsense. Yes, the headlines were unfathomable. But the critical eye that you can cast over it, you can go, actually, this has a lot of sense in it. And you can understand about certain things that are junk. So and so snorts such and such, say sources. Okay, that's not meant to be taken seriously. Reading the National Enquirer gives me that critical thinking eye, okay, what's rubbish, what's real?
Right.
Whereas
I think most
in the
people would
Daily Mail, it's all rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, like, as someone who's never read the National Enquirer, I would assume that that one's also all rubbish as well. Like, I would find it very surprising to find real news articles in the tabloid.
It's not going to be hard-hitting, deep news articles, but what it does, from my point of view, is it gives a more genuine and real flavour of the culture outside of the bubble that I live in
Mhm.
than any other news source that I've ever read. I'm a very middle class person.
Mhm.
And I do not know what the bubble outside my middle class world is sometimes. And picking up the National Enquirer, I can get a glimpse as to what's actually outside there.
Mhm.
Because it's written in a way that's not what I'm used to. So the comprehension age of the National Enquirer is typically 5 to 10 years less than that of a newspaper.
Mhm.
And that's not me casting aspersions on people outside of my social group. It's just how the information is consumed.
Mhm.
And being able to understand how the information is consumed gives you an insight into understanding society at large
Mhm.
and what's in society at large.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I for probably similar reasons, I read our right-wing national newspaper in Canada. Not because I agree with their viewpoints. I read it to see what the other side is saying. Because like I think it's, again, like you mentioned this before, it's like, it's very easy for us to, like, be in our middle class, like, leftist bubbles, and we're making assumptions about what people outside of that bubble are saying and what they think.
Yes.
So I go out of my way to read these kind of right-wing news sources just to understand their point of view, not necessarily to agree with it, because I don't. And to be honest, a lot of the op-eds I read are completely unhinged. So,
They
but
are
it's,
some of the most
yeah.
unhinged individuals are writing for partisan newspapers on
Mhm.
both sides.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so oh my God, I completely had a brain fart there for a second. But I did want to get into some
Does it
more.
smell?
Oh, no, those ones don't smell. It's the other ones that do.
Ah, I see.
I'm having a senior moment for a second, but we're back on track.
The
I did want
AARP
to
will be in touch.
yes, yes. So I want to get into some more personal territory. What's been your experience as a trans person moving from quote unquote Turf Island to the United States?
I'm a self-absorbed narcissist
Oh my
who
God.
believes that she is good enough. So for me, I haven't had that much of an issue as a trans person. I have a lot of coping mechanisms in society at large where I just go, take me or leave me. But
Mhm.
that's just me personally. What I don't understand is how America works. I don't get how the United States of America works. I don't get it. I just don't understand how it functions. It is got to the point where it's so bureaucratic, it's unreal.
Mhm.
It's got to the point where I don't get how the administrative state works. And I'm a trained attorney. I don't get how companies work. Trying to do basic administration with utility companies, libraries, and so on. It's got out of control.
Mhm.
I don't understand how that works. I don't understand how the healthcare system works. I don't understand insurance, because as a Brit, that's an alien concept. I don't understand no-fault insurance, which in the state of Michigan is the only insurance that you can have. Which means that if you have a crash, even if somebody rear-ended you, your insurer pays. Which is just an alien concept to me as somebody who came from a country where you are at fault insurance, where if you have a crash and you rear end somebody, your insurer pays, or if they rear end you, they pay.
Mhm.
So that gets me. But the country as a whole doesn't feel like it's in the 21st century yet. Not from a societal point of view, but from a technology point of view,
Mm.
interacting in Britain, 10 years ago, I was using NFC for payments. That's near field communication. So when you wave your card in front of it, it pays. Or using your phone. In this part of America, that is brand new technology just now being rolled out.
Oh, yeah.
Chip
Yeah,
and
no,
pin? Wow.
Yeah, no, I remember back when I went to Detroit fairly frequently, like people there just like a debit card wasn't even a thing yet. It's like, how do you not have, you guys pay cash for what?
Oh yeah, it's
I find it very bizarre. Like, because like I have spent quite a lot of time in the United States, but I'm from Canada. So whenever, I'm fond of saying that like culturally we're virtually identical. But there are definitely like
that
differences.
French bit.
Well, yeah, America has a French bit too.
Yes, but that French bit got sold.
Yes.
And then purchased.
But yeah,
and
it's like,
and then destiny was manifest.
Yeah, so there's certain things that like
that was, hashtag sarcasm.
Yeah. So yeah, there's like certain things that like I go down there and certain things I feel are so far behind and other things I feel are so far ahead.
It's odd.
Yeah, it's some things I find very strange. I mean, like you said, like their whole payment system is archaic. It just,
and at passport control in Britain and in Ireland, I show my British passport, I show my Irish passport to a machine that lets me through.
Mm-hmm.
I just scan it into a machine and it lets me through. America, a man is doing that on every book.
Yeah. For those listening, Phoebe is miming a stamp on a passport, which I mean, one of my old passports has a USA stamp on it.
Yeah. And it is archaic in that sense. But in other senses, it's got light years ahead. The first country to go to the moon, for example, was America. Light years ahead in some cases. But I don't understand how the United States of America cannot do the basics properly. I spent my first winter in America. We had a massive snowstorm. And I mean, it was an enormous snowstorm. And the power was out for a day. And as a Brit, I was apoplectic. Absolutely gone. I was angry and everything. And my wife was like, oh, what's wrong with you? The power has been out for a day.
Oh, only a day?
She went, yeah, only a day. I went, in Britain, the power goes out for 20 minutes. There's a public inquiry. I remember in London, a few years back, the power went out for 25 minutes. Parliament held an inquiry. There was a public inquiry. There was evidence. There was compensation and everything. Power's out for a day. They'll be back on soon.
Yeah. I mean, we experience the same thing in Canada. Every time there's a thunderstorm, I have to wonder if the power is going to go out. Every time there's an ice storm, I have to wonder if the power is going to go out. And when it does go out, it's like, how many days is it going to go out for?
How can North America, from what it sounds like, not get basic infrastructure correct? How can it not do that?
Yeah.
Two of the wealthiest countries on earth can't keep the lights on.
Yeah, well,
can't keep water running.
Can't keep too busy spending billions of dollars on other things. So
there are many, many things that America and Canada spend far too much money on, in my opinion.
Yes.
But they are not for this place.
So I wanted to segue to let's actually segue back to presidencies, and I want to talk about civil rights, and particularly for LGBTQ rights. So civil rights for marginalized people have been a big theme throughout many presidencies. What are your thoughts on today's fights for civil rights?
It's history repeating itself, but for a different group. It's the same. You will have a reactionary complain that a group is sticking two fingers up at being marginalized and going, stop. And reactionaries are going, how dare you say stop? We quite like you being marginalized. And the group that is being marginalized gets louder and louder. And finally, you hear things from the people who actually matter. And they are the voters. And finally, the people at the very top do eventually get their arse in gear and do something. And the current guy, he's not the best. He's not the worst. Better than the guy before him. And the guy that comes after him should be better than the guy before him. But we can't guarantee that anymore. Because America's at its Barry Goldwater moment. For those of you who don't know who Barry Goldwater was was the opponent to Lyndon Johnson in the 64 election, I think it was, in 1964. Barry Goldwater was not the greatest of people when it came to civil rights, shall we say. And he would have reversed the gains that were made. And we're at that point now. Yes, the individual states are doing a lot of individual things, both good and bad, for a large slice of LGBT people. But there is still a significant slice of the society that is not heteronormative that needs to be looked at. Trans people in general, and I use that term as an umbrella term, are moving forwards. But when it comes to people who are intersex, we are light years behind. And just because, as a trans person, I am making progress with civil rights, I have to be able to pull the civil rights of the people behind me forwards as well. Which is what gets me so much about these that found nonsense LGB only organizations. Because their rights will be just as quickly taken from them as they want to take the rights of other people. You have to, in this day and age, and in every day and age, take the people who are behind you with you when you are moving forwards. Because without their rights getting better, your rights don't get better either. It needs to become the normality. The Overton window has to shift where it is not even on the table, that the rights that are enjoyed by trans people today are the sort of, wow, that's not even questioned. The rights of those based on sexual orientation are not even thought of. There is a minority on the United States Supreme Court that said that Lawrence versus Texas should be looked at again. Lawrence versus Texas is the Supreme Court case that held sodomy laws unconstitutional. And when you have people saying that, you know that the LGB only, we're not TQI plus, blah, 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 don't get this. They'll shoot the people you dislike as quickly as they'll shoot you.
I mean, that's, oh boy, that's something that gets me really riled up is queer folks, a certain segment of queer folks selling out other queer folks for their own comfort. So it's,
I'm all right, Jack. I'm all right, Jack.
It's like, who do you think they're coming for next?
I mean, I use a gun analogy very infrequently, but people do die as a result of rights being taken away.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's a strong metaphor, but
yeah, I mean, it's you don't have to tell me. It's like we do a yearly stream for Trans Day of Remembrance where we read out all the names, and there's a lot of them, a lot, and it's a really, really hard day.
And
yeah,
the thing that you have to understand is oppression of trans people, particularly in certain countries, is government endorsed, such as in the United Kingdom. It's government endorsed.
Yes. I mean, you have the Prime Minister like saying transphobic things to the entire country. So it's like, what do you think the consequences of that are when you have, you know, politicians and others with a lot of money and power, like just influencing public opinions? Like, what do you think that leads to? Like there was an attack. There was a transphobic attack in the UK just this past weekend.
Yeah, and trying to get that into people's psyche is the number one thing. Legislation is fine, but legislation is only as useful as the person that's going to enforce it.
Mm-hmm.
A crime is only a crime if the police officer is going to charge you with it, and you have to, in my opinion, be that irritant to the mainstream that goes, this is unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And this is always unacceptable. If you lose friends because those friends are transphobic or homophobic or biphobic or any other phobic, it may hurt in the moment, but you're probably going to be a stronger person moving forwards. Because do you really want individuals as friends who don't value your own existence?
Yeah. No, well said. Yeah, and it's, you know, my heart goes out to everyone who's, you know, lost someone close to them because they just couldn't see them as people. So it's, you know, I've been lucky. All the people in my life have been very kind to me, and the only people that haven't are people that were never kind to me in the first place. So like it's fine.
I say this, nasty people are going to exist in every walk of life. Yes. They're just going to be nasty people. And I say this, sometimes people are because they have eaten propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes are just
yeah.
And you're never going to change them. They're just
yeah, so
they
can't see everyone.
They would just be horrendous. They are just
Well, we are getting close to wrapping up. We do have a couple of concluding questions that we like to ask all of our guests. But first, before we get into that, is there anything that we missed about presidential libraries in history that you'd like to make sure you say?
Go visit them. Go visit them. If you have one near you and you can afford to go visit one.
Yeah, no, that's
they hold free events. Go to a free event.
That's my
Learn
big
about the history of these things.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway here is like, I mean, I'm a museum nerd. Like I love going to museums, and I never thought to include presidential libraries on my list of things to go. But like now it's just like, oh, well, this sounds actually pretty neat. So now this next question is actually my favorite question. Because as you're well aware, the current trans experiences has a lot of negative framing around it, and often our stories are told in terms of our suffering. But I think it's far more important that we share our joy. Can you share with us an experience that you've had with gender euphoria?
Married to my wife. We have two trans women who are wonderfully married, and that's wonderful. And that's it. We're two wonderfully married human beings. Yes. Something I have noticed about marriage in the sphere of individuals that I know is that heterosexual, quote, heteronormative marriage So this being like cis heteronormative marriage. Fewer people in my life that I can see are getting married in that demographic. Whereas non-heteronormative individuals, so anyone who's not cis het, etc., more of those people are getting married. And I think it's because it gives you rights that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people who are cohabiting, who are cis heteronormative, don't realize they are missing out on a number of rights because they think that they already have them and they don't need them. Whereas to the non-cis heteronormative world, you jump on those rights and you say, I want those rights and I want to keep those rights.
Yes. Because, yeah, I mean, going back to our healthcare discussion, it's a lot of places don't recognize like quote unquote found family, or they may not, even though you cohabitate with someone in Canada, what we call common law relationship, they may not recognize that. So if you are someone who's having a bad time at the hospital and you want to see your significant other and you're not legally married, they may not let you.
Whereas they cannot deny me access to being a healthcare proxy for my wife. They just cannot. Full stop. Anywhere in America.
Yeah.
So if we were to go to a ruby red state and we had a car accident, they could not stop me. They'd probably try.
Oh yeah, but you know, as an attorney, I'm sure you can make a compelling
I enjoy it.
Yes.
I'd really enjoy it. You know, it's like one of those things where you go, oh, a lawsuit. That Lionel Hutz moment of, imagine a world with no attorneys. Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows everywhere.
No, I mean, I always had a very dim view of lawyers until I needed one.
You see, the legal profession, it gets a bad rap until you use a good one. And then you go, hang on a minute.
And now, is there anything that you want to make sure that folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary, trans, and or gender diverse issues?
Just be you. Take a big raspberry and a big two fingers and do this.
I love
society and just be you. If you want to do something outlandish, fine. If you consider yourself to identify as male and you want to wear a dress, go ahead and do it. If you consider yourself to identify as female and you want to wear a pair of boxer shorts, go ahead and do it. If you want to, you know, run around at a nudist colony and say, hey, be my guest, do as you please with your life and have as much fun with your life. Do not, under any circumstances, allow the mold that you were born into to be the mold that you are constrained by, because that is the only thing that is holding you back is you. Be you. Be happy about being you, and make sure that you can look you in the mirror and say to you, yes, I am happy that I did everything that I did. Try something. If it doesn't work, be prepared to say, well, that didn't work. Maybe it will work. Maybe you'll find something else. But don't let yourself be the person who goes, this is my mold, that's it. Cheers.
It's excellent advice. It's advice that everyone should take, whether you're trans or not. You know, it's something, I mean, I've talked about that a lot in one of my videos, and it's just like, the trans experience is not limited to folks who are trans. It's being trans is just rejecting society's
is another
roles.
thing. Food is another thing. I was very reluctant to try certain kinds of nuts, pistachios, cashews, etc.
But then they're so good.
But then my wife goes, just eat one. Just
try
bloody
it.
Try one. Because I've had a negative experience when I was younger. So yeah.
Try it. Yeah, that's excellent
bloody
advice.
try one.
Also, I still have some boxer shorts that I wear because they're very cute. I have a pair that is has like a pattern of wiener dogs, and then I have another one that's like beer sausages and pretzels. So I
But
mean,
here's
I
the
think
real
they're cute and I
question.
still wear them.
Here's the real question: are they comfortable?
Yes. So I tend to wear them whenever I wear dresses because I'm a little bit on the heavier side. And when I walk, my legs rub together. And if I don't have, some sort of fabric there, my legs will rub against each other and they'll chafe and they'll get really irritated and angry. So that's when I wear my boxer shorts.
Chafing is not great.
Yes.
You see, you need to avoid chafing. Just avoid.
Yeah.
Wear
Yeah.
things.
So also, whatever, who cares? Nobody can see them. So.
We hope.
So on that note, we will wrap up.
The end of that sentence is we hope.
Yes. Well, if you do get to see them, it's because I'm allowing you to, and I'm hoping that leads to a fun evening. We'll leave it at that.
And if you're seeing them, and I'm, not giving you permission, it's because I've either fallen over or I'm seeing you in court.
Oh, and on that note, we'll wrap up today's interview. So Phoebe is an LGBTQ plus civil rights activist and religious freedom activist with a strong focus on the separation of religion in all forms and government. You can find her link tree in the show notes. She also has a YouTube channel where you can find her podcast that yours truly has been a guest on. You can also follow her on Instagram and Threads and Twitter. So here is this week's Clatter query that you, our audience, can answer on our social media platforms.
Do you think presidential libraries and museums are tourist traps, or are they valuable places to learn from the past?
Awesome. So next week's guest will be Orion Ovator. They, he pronouns will be discussing the art of zine making. So for community updates, I'm sure everyone already knows this, but my Dune video is out. It's doing super well. So if you haven't already watched it, go watch it. I worked super hard on it and I think it's a really good video. Genderful would like to thank all of our supporters on Patreon: Holly Blash, Winter Vespers, Loch Ness Gamer, Justin Baker Rojas, Yaicio, Ray of Swords, Mirami, The Hessian, and Trans Capybara. Thanks again for joining us, and trans rights are human rights. That's right.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays on twitch.tv/GenderMeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited versions of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you'd like the host to answer or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clouder wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/Meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You can take a few minutes to rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Here's our artist credit. Genderful is hosted by Miranda Katita and GenderMeowster. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful's live stream is produced by Mirami. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and FreeRangeMegs. Genderful's promos and thumbnail graphic are designed by Transgriffin. Genderful's social media is managed by Kainsey. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by FreeRangeMegs, also known as Soma. The current GenderMeowster logo was designed by Siptopia. Genderful is the intellectual property of GenderMeowster. All rights reserved.
Trans rights are human rights. That's right.